Thank you very much, Mrs. Aaron. Let me recognize this morning Ms. Mandra Fagan, the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Youth, Sports, Culture and Constituency Empowerment, Mr. Trevor Shillingford, our Sports Coordinator, Mrs. Kamala John Baptist Aaron, members of the media, our sports enthusiasts, Mr. Joseph Thomas, and others who are here with us this morning, those listening throughout the country for the various medium and beyond. Let me say pleasant good morning to all of those who are listening and all of us present here this morning. And it's my pleasure as the Minister responsible for sports to share with you government's perspective as it relates to sports post-Maria. But before we do that, we will develop a greater appreciation if we understand clearly where we were, which the Permanent Secretary did quite nicely, and I really want to commend her for that brief presentation on where we were as a country as it relates to sports. And even in the presentation that the Permanent Secretary made, we will recognize that government budgeted in excess of $8 million towards the development of sports facility for the year 2017-2018. That constitutes 90% of our capital project in the Ministry of Youth, Sports, Culture. And if that constitutes 90%, it means, therefore, that government recognizes the importance of sports in the development of our population and in the country. And so we were well ahead, as the Permanent Secretary said, with most of the work that we were assigned to do through the Ministry of Sports. We were moving very, very speedily because we really wanted to make sure that by the end of December, most of our capital projects were off the ground. Here came Maria and disrupted our plan. But in everything, we have to give God thanks. We are alive, we are here, and once there is life, there is hope, and we can continue whatever we have planned. Maria came in September and devastated our country seriously. And as has been said, no area in the country, all areas were impacted. All areas were impacted, including sports. And most of our sports facility definitely were affected, most, if not all. But however, I really want to, at this point, commend the Permanent Secretary, the Sports Coordinator, for the vigor in which they started work soon after Maria and ensured that certain things were done. And to this point, we can say that some of our playing fields are usable. And I really want to extend that commendation to the many community members, the members of the National Employment Program, the workers under the National Employment Program, our sports enthusiasts who on their own voluntarily went out there and started clearing some of those fields that were covered with galvanized zinc and everything else, trees that had fallen. And some people really took it on their own to go out there and clean. And then we engaged the National Employment Program team to continue some of those efforts. I must say, for us in the ministry, we recognize the importance of sports and we'll do everything to ensure that we can execute our programs and develop our facilities. As Mr. Shillingford highlighted, and I want to reiterate, the importance of sports in the well-being of our country. As we know, chronic non-communicable disease is one of the problems plaguing the Ministry of Health and its management, which is very, very expensive. And so we recognize that physical activities and engagement in sports where we can burn the excess calories, so we would not have to get too big, so we would control our size, and so would allow our body function to be more effective to prevent onset of diseases, chronic non-communicable diseases. But even more so post-Maria, where we recognize that we are now consuming a lot of foods that can impact on our health. I must say, normally they are there, but we will consume more of that because our local foods are not readily available. And so we consume a lot of that. And so we expect to see a little move in terms of obesity and maybe our diabetics, our hypertensives. And so we really want to caution them to engage in physical activities. But importantly, though, is the psychological impact that sports can have on the well-being of our citizens, because we know most of us are stressed with the effect of Hurricane Maria, and as a result of those sporting activities that has commenced in the school, it will allow the students to engage in something that can help their psychological well-being. And so we are hoping with the onset of our other programs that we can extend that to the wider community. Now, as it relates to some of our facilities, I will try to highlight, as I said, all of them were impacted. I will not spend time highlighting all of them, but we will highlight some of those we know that are more widely used. All of them are used, but some of them are used by many of the sporting disciplines, and organizations, and by the community. We know our stadium, which is one of our I must say, one of the greatest accomplishments that we've had in sports, thanks to the People's Republic of China for giving us this wonderful gift, and we know it was severely affected. And we know the effect of our stadium being affected on our economy and the sports by extension. And so we know the sport at the stadium, most of our roofs were affected. The outfield, the perimeter walls, we had our towers, 2 of our towers fell. We had the electrical cabinets that control the towers, our scoreboard, which was recently installed at $1.3 million. And I mean, it was one of the best scoreboards that we had in the region, you know, from all comments, and that was damaged. And so we have to now look at how we can repair some of those things. And I must say, though, we have received an assessment of the extent of damage at the stadium and the cost to repair it, and you won't believe it is in excess of $6 million to restore everything at the stadium, the VIP booths, the towers, our perimeter fence, and everything that was affected by the storm, to do it in a more climate resilient manner. So we definitely have to look at our way forward in terms of the stadium. Some of our playing fields, or regional playing fields, I can say, and facilities. For me, the Geneva playing field, to me, in Grand Bay, I mean, we've suffered during Erica, and it is worse post-Maria. The field was flooded with sand, stones, logs, and just name it. Our light poles are down. The pavilion was damaged, just like many other pavilions. In fact, all of our pavilions across the island suffered. Either the roof were damaged, or the windows and doors, or some of them, you know, but most of them were damaged. Our lights, where we spent quite a bit of money to light 5 of our playing fields just earlier this year, and all of those lights were affected. All of them were affected by the passage of Hurricane Maria. The Benjamin Park, as I said, they too were affected, but for us, some of the fields like Benjamin Park, it is now in a state where it can be used. So we are thankful for those who've ensured that it was cleared very early so that it can be used. Lindo Park, for example, we have the entire fence fell, the pavilion was damaged, damage to the lights and basketball uprights. Most of our basketball uprights were damaged, as Mr. Shillingford said. Some of them are permanently fixed to the courts, and so it was not movable prior to the storm, and so most of them were damaged, and we definitely have to look to see how we can restore some of them as much as possible. St. Joseph, the field flooded, but thank God it is already usable. Dublin flooded again with logs and stones and sand like everywhere else, and some aspect of the field was eroded. Castle Bruce, I passed there recently, as recent as weekend, and there were people out there playing. So the condition of the field is relatively good. Jolly John's Park, we had our lights that were erected, was damaged. The scoreboard was damaged. You have Lap Lane, it's playable, but you also have the pavilion, and the lights and uprights are seriously damaged. Leo Park in Marigot, the pavilion, the roof, the lights were damaged. So most of those areas, I said, basically the same thing. In Massac, we saw, we had demolition of the old basketball, the facility at Massac, and in order to move on with the work that we had as one of our capital projects. So that was demolished. Now it is being used as a storage space for utility poles, but we are hoping that will be short-lived so that the project can continue, because work had already started there. So we're hoping that we can continue. In Pishneh, where we had one of the areas that was used heavily for basketball, they too suffered loss, but I can say to you, the court is ready to use. In fact, the boys in Pishneh are already on the court, and they have even installed, they have set up a generator, and so they have lights that they can even play at night. So some of the fields, some of the people in the areas have been working feverishly to ensure that some of those facilities are usable. As it relates to the way forward for us as a government, I can say, and I can speak on behalf of the entire government, that we will proceed with most of our programs as articulated in the budget. Most of our programs as articulated in the budget. Granted, we would probably have to look at the time frame. We would have to reset the timetable at which we will execute, because as you heard when the permanent secretary presented, some of our work, for example, the Massac would have been completed. So we now have to review and see when is the next completion date. So definitely with some of our projects, we have to do that. We will proceed with the design for the multi-purpose sports facility. We knew a lot of excitement was buzzing through the country when the Prime Minister mentioned, and we discussed it in the cabinet at the budget. In fact, it was on prior to Erica. And Erica came and we set it aside because we had to redivert funds. Here comes Maria. But we can say we were in advanced stage where we were doing the designs, and we had already paid the Puerto Rican company some monies to begin the work, and so we will continue. The contract was signed, so we will pursue the designs up to the construction document for now in the first instance. Following which we will now have to review the construction timeline. You know, get the funds, and then we have to review when do we start and when do we complete. But definitely we can reassure the Dominican populace and all of our sports enthusiasts, we will not at this time just set it on our back burner. We will definitely continue to look at it with reviewed timelines. We will continue to engage the communities and sports organizations on the way forward, because the sports facilities really, it's not for the government or for the ministers, it's really for the community, and it's always wise to engage them. And they would have to develop an appreciation why some of those things would have to be, we would have to look at them not in the short term but in the long term, because with that devastation, we would have to look at how our funding, where we would have to redirect funds as much as possible to meet some of the very needs in the communities. So they too have to give that level of support to the use of resources. So we would have to engage the communities and sports organizations, and I must commend all the sporting disciplines who attended a meeting with the ministry last week, where we listened to how they were affected or impacted by Hurricane Maria and the way forward. And I can say to you, the meeting was rather very, very interesting. A lot of things came out which meant that this kind of body, this kind of meeting would have to be convened on a regular basis, where we can review our programs, they can discuss, review, and make recommendations. I think it was a very, very interesting meeting, and coming out of that meeting, we see positive things coming out of that for the development of sports and collaboration, which is very, very important. We are also very committed to ensuring that the work at the stadium, as I said, our sports tourism will definitely be affected as a result of the damage to the stadium. And so I can give the commitment that as a minister responsible and as government, we will do everything within our reach and power and ability to ensure that we can recover. We can ensure that the stadium roof is reset before the end of the first quarter of 2018. Importantly for us at the stadium too is the fencing, because really, because of the cost of maintaining the stadium, yes, we must work on the perimeter wall, which is very, very critical, because now it is exposed to all and sundry, and everybody will just come in there, and we really do not want the condition of the stadium to deteriorate further than what Maria has done. So we will be looking very closely in the near future to begin work on in fact, we've secured some of the material to already start work on trying to put up the perimeter fence, the wall. So we will do that very, very shortly. And the roofing will ensure that that is completed before the end of the first quarter of 2018. In the short term, we will look at restoration of the regional playing fields. You will appreciate that we will not be able to do all at one time because of the availability of funds and the extent of damage in the country and other areas that are very critical to people's well-being. And so we definitely will have to look at some of our sporting facilities, but we will begin with the regional areas. For example, as I said, Geneva playing field, which is dear to me as a PAL rep. In fact, as we speak, work is supposed to start on cutting off of the logs today, and so that we can clear it and bring it to, and I have somebody presently doing an assessment, structural assessment for the pavilion, because unfortunately there was also a fire in it that compromised the structure. So we have to look at doing a structural assessment so we can know the extent of work that has to be done to bring it to reasonable condition where it can be utilized again. And I must say, as I speak though of the fire, unfortunately, as I continue to say to most people, while we were affected by Hurricane Maria, but we got even more damage by human disaster post-Maria. And for some of our sports facility, our fields, our lights, some of them were vandalized. Some people cut them to take the panel for lights purposes, and that to me is not acceptable, because if we understand the importance of sports, I think we should all be, that is why I call on organizations to claim ownership for those things and take responsibility. While government will give the facility, but we expect people to take responsibility and do not join in vandalism and destruction of what government spent money to set up for the constituents or for the community and the country at large. So some of those facilities really were vandalized, and it is sad to say, but we cannot hide but to ask people to deter from those kinds of activities or behavior. The Massac basketball, the Massac had court, as the permanent secretary rightly said, work had already started. We had paid half of the contracted sum, and we expected some of the things for the construction, the frames and so, to be on island at the end of September, but unfortunately there was a delay in that. But we are hoping that work, definitely, because the contract was signed and everything, we will proceed with the basketball court. And I know people are looking forward to that facility, because definitely some of our main basketball courts we have to bring into a situation where people can use and play. So definitely we will be looking at the Massac hard court for recommencement of work. At this point, I really want to extend gratitude to, as I said, to community members, the NEP workers, to the Ministry of Sports, the sports coordinator, sports officers, all of those who were out there assisting with the reports that we got on all of our facilities, and for all of those who have worked to restore some of those facilities so that some people can continue to recreate and can remain healthy by engagement in physical activities. So I really want to just implore that people must really just continue to give the support to the Ministry of Sports as we move forward with the development of sports across the island. Granted, some people will be demanding their facility, rightly so, and I mean they have every reason because they understand the importance of sports in their own development. But with the effect of Maria, we definitely have as a ministry to sit. In fact, we've submitted to cabinet where we would want to redivert some of the funds, in what areas, and what areas definitely we want to maintain, like the indoor sports facility, the Massac playing field, the regional playing fields, some of the basketball courts that we definitely want to work on. Lighting definitely will not be something that you will see in the short term, because I mean that is not, while we want the facility to be usable, we will have to probably try as much as possible to use it during the daytime. So as a Ministry of Sports, as I said, I remain committed with the support of the Honorable Prime Minister and the rest of Cabinet to do everything possible for the development of sports and the development of our people through sports. Thank you very much.